Hello, UKIP had their so-called earthquake, our part of the world leading the way. The other parties are still scratching their heads, wondering what to do about it. Do they cross their fingers and hope the Farage phenomenon fades away, or do they take him on? All eyes are on the UKIP leader as he prepares to announce where he'll stand at next year's general election. This is what he told me at the Euro election declaration in Southampton.
I've always said it will be somewhere in the south of England, not too terribly far from the seaside. But we'll make our minds up in the next few weeks.
Well, it's almost certainly going to be in Kent, and it's almost certainly going to be South Thanet. It's a seat he's fought before, back in 2005, when he lost badly, but he got enough votes to stop the Tories winning. Kevin Harrison's been to the seaside to see if the people there are ready for what's sure to be the most high-profile election campaign anywhere in the country.
Grey skies over Ramsgate Harbour, and as well as the seafood stall, the English flags and the Union Jacks, there's a more continental atmosphere on the quayside. It's here in the South Thanet constituency that Nigel Farage could well fight his campaign to become an MP. He tried and failed 9 years ago, but the times have changed. One local observer of the political scene says the UKIP leader's message now works well for some in Thanet.
Farage will come like a white knight to support their cause. They are very, very much against immigration. They're not so much interested in Europe, they're just anti-immigration, and they will support Farage because of that reason.
But they didn't do so in 2005 when he stood here then.
No, things have changed though now. I mean, UKIP has managed to make themselves seem like a viable opposition.
Almost without exception, everyone recognised the South East MEP, and there was no shortage of opinion. Do you recognise this man?
Oh, yes, I loathe and detest everything he stands for, yes.
Why is that?
Because he's a racist.
He's thinking of standing as a parliamentary candidate in this part of the world.
Well, we don't want him.
Normal man, good ideas. Enoch Powell was right. And there's another Enoch Powell, I reckon.
Do you think that his message is resonating both locally and nationally at the moment?
Yeah, I do. I do think so, because I think what he's saying is what people want to hear.
Do you recognise this man?
Yeah, that's that idiot from UKIP.
Labour's candidate here knows UKIP takes votes from Tories and Labour.
UKIP is picking up voters from across the political parties. I think 12 months ago, maybe even 2 years ago, it was just the Conservatives they were picking up most of their votes from. That has now changed, and I think the Labour Party nationally is recognising that now.
And the local paper too smells change in the political air.
It's not just a South Thanet thing, it's not even just a Kent thing. I think that people are very dissatisfied with Europe, and issues about immigration and what's been happening with border control have just grown and grown in people's minds, even if not in reality.
And it promises to be a lively campaign if this welcome he was given in the constituency last March is anything to go by.
So what do those Euro elections mean for that campaign in South Thanet and indeed the general election across our region? Tom Ludzinski is a pollster with Comres. Watch out for a bit of flash photography in a moment.
UKIP's dominance, UKIP's rise, they're a party that started on 3% at the general election in 2010 and now are winning a national election and doing very well all over the country, but particularly in the Midlands and the south of England. And that's going to be a lesson for both the Conservatives and Labour about these are people that they need to be winning over if they are to sort of push on from their respective positions.
OK, let's hear from our guests now. John Denham, Labour's MP for Southampton Itchen, a former Cabinet Minister, of course. Mark Reckless, the Conservative MP for Rochester and Strood. Diane James, one of UKIP's new MEPs for the South East. And Jasper Gerard, the Lib Dem candidate for Maidstone and the Wheel. Let's start with you, Diane James, and let's just answer the point made in that film, because we should give you a chance to respond to it. The woman who says Nigel Farage is a racist.
Well, it's the usual phrase, isn't it, from somebody who just wants to keep on taking the media line, which we've had to fight off for the last 5 months, all the way through the European election campaign. We're not racist, we've made that point. We've made the point we're interested in, and we want a commitment to controlled immigration policy into the United Kingdom. If individuals choose to decide that that is a racist policy, they're accusing Australia, America, Canada, South Africa and a whole host of other countries are being racist.
OK, let's talk about the politics of this. Interesting to hear from that Labour candidate, John Denham, something that you've been saying quite a lot recently, which is that this has got to be taken seriously by Labour because they are eating into your votes as well.
It is, and I think the thing for us is not so much to take on Nigel Farage or UKIP as a party, but actually be talking to those voters who say that they have in the past voted Labour, they'd like to vote Labour again in the future. Now, what's happened to many of them is that the system in this country has failed them for quite a long time. The cost of living has gone up. They've had the worst end of the jobs market. And Labour's job is to make it very clear that we are firm on immigration, but we also have the measures to create the jobs and the well-paid jobs they want, to deal with the cost of living crisis. And those are the issues they want us to talk about. So I think Labour's campaign is not so much going to be having a line to say about UKIP. Well, we will remind people that Nigel Farage says he's a Thatcherite, and he wants to bring back Mrs Thatcher's legacy, but we'll actually be talking to the real issues in those people's lives, and I think we will win those votes back at the next election.
And I suppose the Conservatives have a dilemma, Mark Reckless. Do you try to out UKIP?
Well, at the last election, I was endorsed by UKIP.
I remember.
I've campaigned all my adult life to leave the European Union. I won a vote in Parliament to cut the EU budget, the first time that the coalition government had been defeated on the floor of the House, or the first time, really, there's been a Eurosceptic majority
UKIP, shouldn't you?
For 40 years. Well, I'm campaigning to leave the European
It was actually a Labour proposal, wasn't it, that you backed? We put it forward first, so good to see you forward.
On the contrary, John, it was my proposal, which you very kindly came in and voted for.
We proposed it.
But what I should say is that on the European Union, I say to people, it doesn't necessarily resonate at the European election, it may at the general election, though, that if people want to vote for an independent Britain, they need a Conservative government that will give them that chance in a referendum.
And are you hoping UKIP probably won't stand against you at the next election? Any little local deals going on?
It's a matter for UKIP.
OK. Jasper Gerard, poor old Lib Dem seem to have been sort of swamped by this UKIP rise, and they've knocked you into 4th or 5th place.
Not where we work. I mean, in, for example, Maidstone and the Weald in the local elections, we were actually 10 points ahead of all other parties. I think UKIP tend to do well in areas where other parties neglect, but where we work hard, we win. And we will, at the next election, will be, for example, emphasising the positive things we've been doing to help ordinary people, such as tax cuts for low-paid workers, a purely Liberal Democrat idea, the National Apprenticeship Scheme in Maidstone alone, that's created 1,600 apprenticeships. That's about tackling the real problems that affect people's lives, rather than just getting into this kind of bellicose rhetoric, as perhaps UKIP and the Conservatives are increasingly now doing, and even perhaps Labour now joining in, trying to sort of out UKIP. We're very distinct from that. We stand toe-to-toe against UKIP, and we want to make that very clear.
OK, let's just have a look at some of the figures from the European elections, and stress these are European election figures, and I think we can see some interesting examples there. There's Thanet, where we think Nigel Farage might stand. UKIP, 16,000. Next were the Conservatives on 8,000. We got these results by council area, as you can see. In your part of the world, Southampton, John Denham, UKIP won. In your part of the world, Jasper Gerard, Maidstone, UKIP won.
But let's
in
see the
your
general
part of the world,
if you have a look at the local council elections in Southampton, you find Labour winning and UKIP coming 3rd. So to extrapolate just from the European election and say that's what's going to happen
Europe
is a mistake.
Is UKIP's big issue, so of course they're going to do better on that.
Look at Oxford on there.
Yes,
you came 5th in Oxford. Is that because people are a bit smarter in Oxford and they've seen through you?
No, not at all. Not at all. There's a couple of issues, if you don't mind, which I'd like to mention. One is that the poll that's suggested indicated quite clearly that 86% of people who voted UKIP will vote with us, stay with us in the general election. So that gives a lot of resonance to those figures to say that support is not going to go away.
Why didn't they vote for you in the same numbers in the council elections?
I'm just coming to the first question that you mentioned in terms of Oxford. I've made the point, a number of us have made the point, that where there are areas where the population is highly Europhile anyway, the likelihood of them voting for UKIP is going to be pretty minimum.
Why are people in Oxford particularly Europhile?
And it's a university town, there's a lot of foreign students there, and if you remember, there was a lot of money poured in by the European Union to support the European Union movement in the various universities. All of the hustings debates were sponsored by them. There was a real big push to try and keep the student vote and the vote associated with the universities. So I'm not surprised by what happened in Oxford. It's obviously a place where there's work to be done. But look at what we've achieved elsewhere in the southeast with those real pockets of very, very solid move, with a vote share showing us between and up to 46%.
Are you one of those people, John Denham, who thinks, well, next year when it comes to choosing a Prime Minister, the Farage phenomenon will fade away, like it did last time?
I think it will be there to some extent, but people will be choosing a government. And actually the truth is that UKIP says we want to leave the European Union, we want to cut taxes on bankers. Many of their members have advocated privatising the NHS. Nigel Farage...
True,
no,
John.
it is, no, Diane, no, it was in your last manifesto. I know
that's our last manifesto, John.
What you cannot do, Diane...
Well, I'll judge the Labour Party and voters will on their 2010 manifesto, which is what you're asking us to do.
When you have brought forward policies, and you'll have to do it next.
We're going to. We've said when they will come through at our Doncaster conference.
So we'll see what comes forward. But the record so far is that UKIP has no programme for government in this country.
You could be all things to all people, can't you?
But UKIP, the key point is this, Phil. UKIP has not yet produced any programme for government in this country which helps the very people who voted for them in the local elections. Their position on Europe is disastrous for this country. It will be economically damaging for this country, and they haven't got anything that's going to tackle the cost of living crisis. They're not going to deal with the abuse of the minimum wage. They don't like labour protection. They want to turn education back 50 years with a grammar school in every town.
And this is the Labour Party that wants to put 1% on national insurance.
Therefore, we are talking about Mark and Jasper desperate to get in as well, which they will do as soon as we've had this quick break. Okay, we're still discussing the fallout from the local and European elections. Jasper Gerard, Lib Dem candidate in Maidstone and the Weald. What do you think is going to happen to the Farage phenomenon, as we're calling it tonight?
Well, of course, the more the media talk about it, it becomes a bit self-fulfilling. You know, we don't have endless media shows talking about the future of the Conservative Party or the Lib Dems or the Labour Party.
Well, there were lots of discussions about the Clegg phenomenon during the last general election campaign, I seem to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. But now it's all focused on UKIP. So, of course, at the moment, they're on the ascendancy. But, you know, Nigel Farage has said that he's going to model UKIP's method on Lib Dem tactics of basically fighting guerrilla warfare campaigns in different places, trying to win parliamentary seats. But, you know, the Liberal Democrats found that incredibly hard to break through into Parliament in serious numbers. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see when the general election comes, whether all this current popular support for UKIP, even if it does survive into the general election, whether that translates into seats, or whether come the next election people are going to start actually thinking about the real issues such as the cost of living, and they're going to look at, for example, Liberal Democrats having delivered tax cuts for ordinary workers, you know, free childcare in the budget, in the Queen's speech this week, the apprenticeship scheme, things like that, and actually helping people get on in life, creating a stronger economy, fairer society. I think those are the sort of issues that people are going to actually vote on.
We'll talk about the Queen's speech in a minute. It's interesting the point Jasper makes there, Diane James, isn't it, just briefly, about the Lib Dems, how long it took them. I think Norman Baker stood in Lewis 3 times, I think, before he got elected. It took him sort of 15 years to establish that kind of local support that enabled him to win the seat.
Yes, but if you take Eastleigh, which I fought last year...
And lost to the Liberal Democrats.
Well, yes, OK, fair enough, but only by a few votes. Only by a few votes, remember. You know, we went from under 4% to just under 28% in the space of what, 3 years. That shows you the power of this party at the moment. And yeah, I rightly recognise that we are only 20 years old as a party, but look at what we are doing in the space of literally only a few months. We haven't taken 15 years to get there. We're doing this in the space of 15, 18 months.
Mark Reckless, do you regret not joining them?
Well, I think what UKIP have done is they've indelibly linked immigration in Europe as an issue. And I think Theresa May and that this government, led by the Conservatives, have got immigration from outside the EU down to the lowest in 30 years. But with what the euro is doing to southern Europe, we're learning that actually that flow of people into this country, we need to change the European treaties or leave the European Union in order to control that. But we can't have the whole debate about Europe being about immigration, because I want to leave the European Union because I want Britain to be a more prosperous country. I want to control our own country. I want to get rid of all this EU regulation. I want to negotiate deals with the fast-trading countries
just
in the emerging
immigration,
markets.
Which seems to concern all those people in Ramsgate, and I'm sure in all your areas. Is it possible for David Cameron to renegotiate our membership so that the freedom of movement of people is in some way restricted? Is that possible?
I don't believe it is. But what David Cameron is offering is a in-out referendum where the people can decide to leave the European Union so we can once again control our own borders as well as our own economy.
But what would these reforms be that you would be satisfied with?
I mean, if David Cameron told us what he was trying to achieve, which he hasn't, we might have an idea. But look, I want to ask Mark this. We had a Queen's speech yesterday which could have taken practical action to deal with immigration issues now, could have taken tough measures to deal with agency workers, could have taken tough measures to deal much more effectively than is proposed with exploitation of the minimum wage. That was not done in this Liberal Democrat Tory Queen's speech yesterday.
Immigration control, so it's a bit rich, isn't it?
Wait a minute. We had a Queen's speech. This is the problem about politics. There's an issue about immigration out there. There was a Queen's speech yesterday in which your two governments had some practical measures that could have been taken now, which would address not all, but some of the concerns we had. And that opportunity was missed.
Which, for instance, we are doing in terms of minimum wage and increasing the fines. But can I say, actually, you talk the talk on free movement in Europe, but at the end of the day, you will always stay in the European Union, and free movement is a core principle. If we want to control movement and decide who comes to our country, we need to leave the European Union, and a Conservative-led government would give people that referendum.
I think this is the legitimate debate, if you like, between yourself and Diane, because my view is we are better off in the European Union, but we can make changes to the way that free movement operates to deal with many of the concerns the public has got. Well, for example, at the moment, we have agencies which go abroad to Europe and recruit exclusively a workforce from abroad to bring it here. We have yes, and look at Southampton Hospital. They have 144 European Union nurses recruited in the last 2 years, which is almost exactly the same number of nurse training places that this government cut in the local hospital. If we had maintained nurse training, we would have had 144 fewer EU migrants into this country. So if you actually have a concerted approach to this, you can make a difference. But the government is not doing it.
But surely the grown-up approach here, the fundamental problem is that we have a British workforce that isn't properly trained and properly motivated. What Nick Clegg has done is done a full audit of all the areas where we're sucking in foreign labour, and he has put extra resources into training British workers to do British jobs. So, for example, through the National Apprenticeship Scheme, over 1 million apprenticeships have been created under this government. That's purely a Liberal Democrat measure. Now, that is surely the way to tackle immigration. It's tackling the problem rather than just sort of going for headlines and saying somehow we're going to end immigration from the European Union. How are any of these parties going to do that?
What Gordon wanted to do, and I think this is right, is actually make sure you've got the skills right, but also the labour market right. Where you have employers deliberately choosing to have a foreign workforce over a local one because they can work more cheaply and they can exploit the agency rules, that is wrong, and we should say so. There's nothing anti-European about saying let's sort these things out so that exploitative employers get dealt with.
But how will we ever get higher wages if people are always undercut by more and more labour coming in from Southern Europe?
The reality is we will get higher wages as a member of the European Union because our economy benefits from being in the European Union. You and I don't. No, it's not a disaster. We actually benefit, and Jasper will agree, by being part of a market of 450 million people.
I mean, John and everybody here, I'm just fundamentally amazed, and so are voters, when you can still say that an individual who's earning maybe £400 a month is not going to come here to the UK and enjoy higher wages, a better standard of living, and have access to all of the services. And unless we actually look at, excuse me, I'm speaking, and until we actually look at controlling that mechanism, and we cannot control it, it's a fundamental tenet of our membership of the European Union, there is only one option, and that is exit. And the way I will disagree with Mark, and it's probably the only one I will over the last few minutes, we do need a referendum, I don't doubt that, but it's got to be a referendum that gives us a clear choice of in or out, and not the fudge that we've had for the Labour Party.
If you remain in a single market, you will still have free movement of labour. So this is complete nonsense, this idea that UKIP or the Conservatives would somehow be doing anything to protect British. And how would you negotiate that? How
are you happy to say to young people in Southampton who might want to work in other parts of Europe in the future that they should lose that right? Because that's the choice you are making. When you say let's end the free movement of labour, you are saying to all of those people who work abroad from this country, you should expect to lose that right.
John, now, there are more Brits in Europe than there are foreigners in the UK.
When you explicitly are prepared to accept that that's the consequence on the careers of our young people.
Would somebody from Southampton, a young person, go to Spain, Greece, Italy, Portugal, where unemployment is up at 60%.
But they might want to go to Sweden or to Germany or to other parts of the European
Union. There are British people working in the European Union.
Why do they have to be a member of the European Union to do that?
Well, the free movement
We've
rights...
got free movement across the rest of the country.
The free movement rights come from the fact we're in the European Union. And I'd ask you this question. You fought a by-election in Eastleigh, a very effective campaign, telling everybody in Eastleigh that 27 million Bulgarians and Romanians were...
Access to the United Kingdom.
We have to deal with. But when you put leaflets through people's doors, scaring them into the idea that 27 million people are going to turn up, next year, that is irresponsible. 27 million. Where are the 27 million Romanians and Bulgarians who were coming here last year?
John, like a lot of politicians, I think you have a problem with that.
Do you think you're preparing to fight the general election next year in Maidstone, Jasper? Do you think these issues will be centre stage in that election? Campaign, or will it be the health?
I think some people do feel threatened by immigration. That's certainly the case. But equally, there are a lot of young people, for example, who are hugely happy about the opportunity to go and working in Britain. So no, I think the main issue that people are going to be worried about, and the people that I talk to in Maidstone, they're worried about things like whether they're going to have a job. You know, and 1.6 million jobs have been created in the private sector under this coalition government. Things like whether their kids are going to get a proper training with the apprenticeship scheme. They will do. You know, things like their children's education. You know, the Lib Dems have delivered things like free school meals. And Nick Clegg will still be your leader, will he? Absolutely. I mean, he's been a phenomenal success at the last general election. I think given the chance again in a head-to-head debate with David Cameron and Miliband, I think
and
bring
Nigel
it on.
Farage. And Nigel Farage.
Well, and sadly, I'm not sure he's going to make the cut. Didn't do well in that, did he?
What, you mean Nick Clegg won't make the cut? Yes, I agree with that.
No, because of course,
there's party loyalty and there's party loyalty.
Farage, of course, can do very well if it's all on his agenda. If it's just let's just attack foreigners, let's attack Europe. Of course, he's going to do very well. But if he's actually asked, if you ask, and he's the only leader who was prepared to do so. Where was Miliband? Where was Clegg? Where's Cameron?
We'll have to leave it there. We've run out of time. Thank you very much indeed. If you stay up very late tonight, you'll get the results of the Newark by-election. So see what the next chapter is in the UKIP story. But that's it from us for now. We'll see you soon.